Before we get going into your Hockey IQ podcast episode, I want to thank our sponsor, Rapid Shot. Rapid Shot is the smart shooting lane. It's like a batting cage for hockey players. Very cool. Tracks your shot in three ways: accuracy, shot speed, and reaction time. Easy to use. Actually, I used it when I played and was growing up. Very easy. Simply scan your phone in, select your settings, and start shooting. You can see your stats on the app and online. You can check them out at rapidshot.com. Great small business. I actually grew up with one of the owner's sons and have played with all the family members by now, just in local pickups here in Ohio. Very cool local business. Awesome product. I love it. I know quite a few NHLers have them in their homes. A lot of D1 programs have it at their rinks. So you have to check this out. Rapidshot.com. Check it out. Rapid Shot, thank you so much for sponsoring our podcast. On the Hockey IQ podcast today, we bring on David Urquhart. He is the head coach of the McGill men's team in Montreal, Canada. So, David, welcome.
Great to be here.
Excited to dig into your background a little bit, but then also some of the research and how you've approached things, because you're quite a student of the game and specifically into more so the side of psychology, culture, making sure you're creating a good quality environment for athletes. So if we start there at your master's.
So I was lucky enough to complete a master's degree while I was an full-time assistant coach at McGill. Studied sports psychology. Funny enough, I did an undergrad in business commerce, and I was always coming around to sports psych after that. I was always interested in the leadership side of things in business and how to run good companies and the organizational structure of well-run companies that were successful over long periods of time. And there's a lot of commonalities in sport as well. So part of that master's research was looking at successful coaches that have won multiple championships in university hockey. And as a coach myself, it was great to learn from the people I got to interview. Got to interview 8 coaches from Canada and the US, and for men's and women's sport. And it really, I found myself really lucky to be able to sit down with those people. And you can't sit down with great coaches and not learn something. So it was a great experience.
So from that, what are some things that you've taken from them and made your own? Because obviously you just can't take it, rip it out, and turn it around turnkey style. You have to make it your own in some capacity. I'm curious, what are some of those lessons, some of those commonalities that came about?
First thing that comes to mind is one of the coaches talked about getting the right people on the bus and getting them in the right seats. And as my first year coaching at McGill, it takes some time to find out those people, the right people in the right seats. And when you do get them in those seats, it makes a big difference in terms of execution of play and the success you have on the ice. And when people talk about culture, it's a word that's often overused, but you think about the mix of people that are in the dressing room and the chemistry of the group. And when people are in their right roles and they understand their expectations and they have clear plans for what they can do in their roles, they tend to want to succeed, and they tend to push the team in the right direction.
So you would say defining of roles is extremely important.
Yeah, that's one of the things that comes out. Defining the role. In terms of overall success, is that what you're referring to?
I'm being very open-ended on purpose.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's the defining roles is very important, and then also fit in terms of how the team's values align with the values of the players on the team. And as a coach in university hockey, you get to set those values of overall for the team and the organization. A little bit different in pro sports where you have general manager, you have head coaches, you have some different organizational structure. Whereas in university hockey and NCAA and U sports, it's the coaches generally like the CEO, and he's the guy that brings the people in. He has the last call, and who's coming into the team, who's going to be part of that program, and not only the players but also the staff. And when you're choosing staff and you're choosing players, it's there's a fit that's involved in both. And if you have people that are echoing the same sentiments as the head coach, as the assistant coach, if the support staff, all the way through, if they have an aligned message, then that's getting passed on to the players. It's going to be consistent. When you have consistent messaging, you'll often have consistent results. And if it's the right messaging, hopefully it's successful results, right? So, and if you're bringing in the right people who are talented hockey players, that's part of it. And for us, a big part of it is being really good student athletes. So we look at both sides of that at McGill, and always looking to bring in great students and great players.
Well, you're going to have those great students and great players for more than 1 year. So I'm curious about the internal leadership development that needs to happen, whether that be just like a personal leadership, like leading yourself, or leading others. I'm curious what that looks like for you, or what are maybe some important keys to that development process.
Well, the personal leadership development, that's the first part of it. And as a coach, you want to be able to set the example and be able to walk the talk. And it's the same for the leaders on the team. So if you're a veteran player, whether or not you have a C or an A on your jersey, you're going to be a leader. There's going to be someone on that team that's looking up to you. And so that personal leadership, the first step in that is bringing your best effort every day. And part of that, things that align with our team values from our perspective, is talk about a few things. One of them is you come every day to get better. So you go to get better every day. You bring an exceptional work ethic, and you enjoy the journey. So those are three things from a personal level that you can be a leader in each of those areas. And it's something that everyone can accomplish. And
you mind repeating those real quick? So I got that you come to work with the goal to improve and enjoy the journey. What was the third one?
And have an exceptional work ethic. And if you bring those, that's the environment that you're creating for the people around you as well. So if you have an exceptional work ethic, you're challenging the person next to you to succeed. So if and that shows up in practice, so in individual drills, one-on-one drills, then that's where, that allows you to set a higher standard. And if you're getting better, you're pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, and you're improving, then your standards for the team are going to continue to rise over time. And then the other part for being a leader is accountability, and having accountability partners within the team. And often that's the captains and the assistants who are holding their teammates accountable. And then it's also the coaching staff's responsibility to hold the players accountable to the standards of the team, and setting the standard at a high enough level where it's pushing them outside of their comfort zone to a point where they're improving on a daily basis, but not too far that they're going to get discouraged and not continue to make strides towards getting better. And then another thing that's important, I would say, from the player's perspective, is being a mentor and modeling the behaviors that you want within your team. And so you yourself have to be the model of what you expect. So if you're not getting the results that you want, the first thing that you should look at is yourself, to say, well, am I demonstrating the things that we need? Or is that in line with where we want the team to go? And part of that is being a good teammate, right? Being a friend, a good teammate. But there's always a challenge for the guys to say, well, where's the line between being a good teammate and friend and holding the guy accountable? And that's where, they don't always understand that holding the guys accountable is being a good teammate and being a good friend. And then that's when you have that, and you have an environment inside the dressing room where guys are willing to make mistakes, willing to learn, willing to push themselves and each other, then you're in a position where they're going to get the best out of themselves and each other. And sometimes it doesn't always mean winning, but that means reaching your full potential as a team.
Yeah, I love that. I call them accountability buddies. That way they hold each other accountable. They're the accountability buddies. Love it. And then the second part that you mentioned, and I think we can dive into a little bit deeper, is what I call the difference between kind and being nice. Being nice is like, oh, everything's looking great. When someone has something in their teeth and you're looking good. Like, that's nice. Kind would be like, hey, you got something in your teeth there. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't want that person to go through the rest of the day with something on their teeth. Now, obviously that's a PG rated version. There's many different versions you can relate in the rest of your life. But I always say I'd rather be kind and have people who are kind, because we are gently pushing each other in the correct direction while having some niceness to it, rather than just being nice, like, haha, and not having the accountability to go with it. So I love that. What are some ways that you like to hold people accountable? Because you don't want to do it in a way that turns people off. And I always say, when you're coaching, whatever you do is either going to add pressure or it's going to add permission with the culture. Like, are you going to let something slide and give that permission? Or are you going to crack down on it and put pressure? And then finding the balance between the two.
It starts with creating the environment where players are know that they're going to make mistakes, because everybody makes mistakes in games and practices. And understanding that the coaching staff and their teammates are there to help them reach their goals and help them get to a point where they're improving, to improve from those mistakes. And like you're saying about being nice or kind, like it's being the thing that's best for the team. If you think about the ultimate goal is to make the team better, for the coach, for the teammates, is if you're making the team better, then that's holding your teammate accountable. And if you're not, you're not making the team better. And understanding that as a whole, as a group, then that kind of makes it easier to say, okay, well, you didn't stop at the net there, get it next time. And if your teammate's saying it, but that yourself that you didn't do it, but knowing that, there's that personal accountability, that knowing that I didn't do it, there's accountability to your teammate, knowing that they did do it, and the coach as well. But when and I'll bring it back to one of the stories that one of the NCAA coaches told me, was that they had a player, a first year player, and their team captain on a workout, and their strength coach was in the room when they're riding the bike, and the strength coach got a call. He had to get out of the room, and that first year player, as soon as the strength coach left, he stopped working out, stopped putting forth an effort. And the captain right away just started lacing into him and saying, hey, that's not what we do here. We're here to get better. You're doing this not for you, for your teammates. And then when the strength coach came back in, he saw that the captain was laying into the guy, and he just didn't say anything, because it was taken care of. And when you have a team like that, when you have an environment like that, where the players are holding each other accountable to the standard that's set by the coach and from the team from the previous years, that's when things are going well. That's when things are going right. So they have to feel comfortable enough. They have to have that permission, and from the leadership perspective, from the leadership group, to take that into their hands. And in order to do that, they have to have clear understanding of what the standards are as well. So from the coach's perspective, it's important to set the standard, hold the players accountable to the standard. And then from from my personal experience, being just finishing first year as the head coach back at McGill, is being consistent with that standard. And now that we have players that understand what it is from playing for a year, that they can start passing that on and being mentors to the younger players on the team. And that mentorship and modeling the behaviors, that's a lot stronger than the coach saying, hey, you didn't stop at the net. It's a lot stronger when your captain stops at the net every single time, because when Sidney Crosby's doing it every single time, and you're the first year player for the Pittsburgh Penguins, the coach says, hey, just look at that guy. right? And that's the reason why they're there every year. That's the reason why they win. They have great leadership. So uh, I think that would be it for that point.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably a commonality that you probably found was the fact that there was a player or two that were exceptional examples and drove the bus. Like I always say that rather than the freshmen picking up the pucks and grabbing the water bottles, it should be the captains or the seniors that year. Like the older guys should take care of it. The new guys are trying to get acclimated enough. They don't need an extra stressor on there.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they're showing the right behaviors, like it's the difference between a program that is sustainable versus one that is not, is once the players start taking the ownership of the standards. And I'm a big Steelers fan, originally from that area. So yeah, the standard is the standard. Everyone models it. We're all good.
Yeah, I like that. And that's the sweep the sheds from the New Zealand All Blacks as well, right? That's, at the end of the day, you clean the dressing room, you made the mess, you clean it up, right? It's not on one guy, it's on everybody, right? So it's that team, that all about the team.
Yep. Well, talking about the team and habits, I'm curious of the culture of practice. So from your experience, what does a good culture of practice look like? What is the right culture to continuously improve? Because there's so many ways that you see teams run practice. I'm curious what that is for you.
Well, it's habits. If in one word, that's what I would say. And luckily enough, in my role, I get to go and watch some other teams practice too. Watch some major junior teams practice when we're recruiting players, and it's fun watching other coaches practice, how they run things, and you learn from them. You can take some drills, adjust them, make them your own. And
or the opposite. You have your anti-mentor where you're like, I really wouldn't do it that way. This is terrible.
Yeah, exactly. So that's part of it, is just the learning process. But in terms of what's the culture of practice, it's developing the right habits. And I really like following a couple guys on Twitter, David Goggins and Jocko Willink, and they're they talk a lot about habits, and they say everything is habit forming. And so if you're doing something right, you're forming good habits. But if you're doing something wrong, you're also forming a habit in the wrong way. So that shows up in simple things, and coaches talk about it all the time. Stopping at the net, backtracking hard on pucks, hitting the net, making passes on the tape, all those little things. Those are all examples of within practice to say, well, that's the standard, that's the expectation, and it's every day, right? And the work ethic, it's it's a habit when you do it all the time, and it's hard. So that first practice of the year is a time when you set the example, and you're hoping that your veteran players are those guys that are leading the charge on that. And then also, the mistakes are part of it. So if there's a challenging drill, or it's you're learning some new system stuff, and it's mistakes are going to happen, so you got to learn from them, right? And how you approach that is important too. So and that takes a little bit of time for some players coming from different environments. They might feel like they're being attacked, and each player, they like to be coached in a different way. And understanding your players and when to approach it. Some approach it on video, some approach it right away. That's an important part of it. But that culture of practice, you want to create situations that are game like, want to have high intensity, want to make it recreate high pressure situations if possible, so that when you get to those situations in games, you've seen it before. And that's the fun thing, that's the challenging thing. When you do that, in university hockey specifically, you're playing less games. So if you can recreate some of those situations and that you might not see every day, then when you get to them, you tend to have more success, because under high pressure situations in games, you revert to your training.
I like this a lot. I'm a big fan of habit development in practice. I'm curious, do you write out these habits that you're looking to form? How do you approach it? Do you have just like the why behind the drill as you're doing it? Or is this just something you're preaching as you're going along and slowly and surely layering that in?
one of the things is the sound bite, is I like to find one or two keywords that can stick, and how do you make it stick? So if you have a drill, stop at the net, hit the net, but different keys for each drill. So the shorter and more concise you can be, the easier it is to remember, and you can go back and repeat on those things. So there is keys, for each drill within each one. They're all purposeful when you're creating a practice. It tends to be you're looking at what you're doing from the week before in the games, and we're looking at the week ahead and saying, okay, what do we need to improve on? And that can kind of tie into the mental side of it as well, is that if you want to have repetition, you want to have a keyword, you don't have to think too much, because when you get to that situation in the game, you want to react, and you don't have to think. And so that when you get those, go through it more and more in practice, then you can react quicker in games.
Another thing from practice that you and I are very high on, abnormally high on, is angling. I know that we're a big fan of angling well. I like to even approach it from the offensive side. Like, how do you break down someone who's trying to angle you? Curious where that came from, and maybe there's an aha moment. Maybe it's just something you've always had, and I'm curious why you love angling so much.
It's a really important part of the game, and maybe didn't think about it as much in previous years, but going back to watching other teams practice, and I was asked to do a presentation for Hockey Eastern Ontario, and they mentioned that it was one of the deficiencies in the organization is for the young guys and for the young coaches. It's a little bit more difficult to teach. And I tell you the truth, I didn't put a whole lot of thought into it before. It was just part of the game. And then when you start thinking about it and breaking it down to different elements, there's things to it. And going back to the keywords, you want to have an early stick position. So like if it's an early stick, you want to match speed and you want to finish in front. So like when you're going back to, okay, what are the habits of practice? How do you describe things? And if you can have those couple key points, key words, and you're not standing at the board explaining it for 20 minutes or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, like you want to get through that practice pretty fast. And if you can get a couple of those key points in, it's important. But if you look at the game, there's angling on every play. And if you can influence the puck to one side or another, you can help your teammates anticipate. And if you anticipate well, you can probably get the puck back defensively and keep the other teams in bad areas of the ice. And as the season has gone this past year, you spent more time thinking about it, spent more time practicing it, and it showed up in different variations of drills. And really it was watching 3 different junior teams practice. They all had it as part of their practice. And that was kind of the light bulb event for me, saying, all right, well, this is, they're doing it at the junior level, and in, the minor hockey level, they're talking about it a little bit more, and we still need to do it. It's a big part of it. So it's one of those things that as you get older, it doesn't change. It's just as important. And as you get older to university hockey, it's even more important to revisit some of those little details of the game that might not be as fun to practice, but it's fun when you have the puck and when you get the puck back. So that's the carrot at the end of that one.
Yeah, and especially with just how skating physically operates over being able to like run in many different areas. Like skating, you kind of get locked in on certain movements. So angling is extra important, because otherwise your skates will be jammed somewhere and the other person will be behind you and gone, and you're nothing but a traffic cone. So yeah, I've always found the angling, everyone thinks about it as maybe like a forecheck, but the more you watch, as you said, like it just shows up in so many different elements. Cutting ice, I feel like there's a lot of underrated players that they force how the game is played just by the angles they take, and the rest of us just happen to operate in that.
And you can add on to that stuff too, right? Like the skating aspect. So we say match the speed, but that's not easy to do when someone's skating full speed directly at you. So what approach do you take? What type of skating is involved in that approach? what type of skating is involved in when you have your speed matched and you want to keep it, and so he doesn't cut inside, so the player, he or she, doesn't cut inside on you. There's some skills within that skill that take a little bit of time, and that's that's the nuances of it that are the challenge. The stick, when do you flip the stick from one side to the other? And there's a lot of different little elements to it that even as my getting as a coach, when it was my first camp, when I was with San Diego in the American League, got to watch NHL training camp, and one of the first drills they did in their practice was an angling drill. And it's amazing that even NHL veterans of many years had their stick in the wrong position, were getting beat. And it shows the importance of it, to say, okay, well, after a summer off, you got to get back to the little details, and going back to the culture of practice is, you haven't practiced in 4 months after the summer, and some bad habits sink in from summer hockey and training, and those are the details that you got to get back, those little details of the game, things like even just the type of passing it on the stick and hitting the net, and all those things that they add up, those little details over the course of a game, of a season, and the frequency of those events. So if you miss, you're not deliberate in your passing, so you miss one or two passes in practice, so you miss your rep. All of a sudden you miss your rep, you don't get the shot on goal, your teammate doesn't get the shot on goal. That adds up in terms of your development. But then in the game, over the course of the season, if you can have 2 or 3 more good passes in a game, and that allows your teammate to get an extra shot, 2 or 3 shots a game, or lets you to get 2 or 3 more shots a game over a season. In the NHL, that's 80 games. If it's 3 more shots, that's a lot more scoring chances that you're going to get for yourself and the team. So those are the little details in practice. You say the culture, it's like, okay, we want to be good. We want to be deliberate with what we're doing in terms of the drill design, but then also within the execution of the drill and the execution of the habits within those drills, it's important. And going back to angling, the habits within the drills of the angling. Okay, so we have a good stick. What does that mean? What does that look like? That's going to take a little bit of time. We want to have good skating. So what does that look like? That's going to take a little time. And everyone's not going to be on the same playing field with that stuff. So it'll take some more time to regain those habits for some guys. And with us, we got guys that are coming in their first year that maybe haven't been exposed to some of this stuff as often. And that's part of the fun of coaching, is spend a little bit of time and being able to evaluate what's needed to bring them up to speed for university hockey.
Yeah, I mean, the little things become the big things, especially when you start to add them all up. It's massive, absolutely massive. Can't stress that enough to everyone listening in on finding details. And I feel like that's one of the biggest compliments you hear from a coach, man. He or she's got such a detailed game. Like it's so big, especially if you're trying to, maybe work your way into a lineup and stay there for a long time. Details will get it done. And we've been talking a lot about habits with these details. I'm curious about some of the off ice habits and training that we're doing, because there's so much, like if you go with a team, everyone gets the same access for the most part in practice. Maybe there's a little bit difference in the game, but the real major difference maker is going to be what happens away from the rink, off the ice, in preparation and building up all of these habits and all these details. Curious for you, talking about off ice habits and training, what does that look like when we're talking about habits training in season, habits training off season?
One of the deficiencies that came up when talking with guys from pro is fit overall strength and fitness. And so when we're talking about off ice, off season stuff, that's where you're able to build your foundation for that. So players making the jump from junior to pro, from the American League to the NHL, at each of those levels, and from junior to university or college, there's a massive jump up in terms of the physicality and the strength of the players. And if you're going from junior to to college and university, you're playing against men. And it's the same thing from junior to pro. And then from the NHL or from the American League to the NHL, it's guys who have been there for a long time and they've done it. And they do things really well and they have their process in order. So that first aspect in terms of, what are the habits in the off season, it's building a foundation to be able to play at or near your peak for the entire season. And that's, it's different for everybody in terms of what type of player they are and what type of expectations they have within the game. But what's not different is the approach. So the habit would be, what's your plan? Like develop a plan early in the summer, sit down with the coaching staff and say, okay, here's the areas that are our strengths. Let's continue to build on these. Here's some areas that we'd like to continue to improve that we've shown some improvement on. And then here's some deficiencies that will help you going forward. And then targeting those and then using that as, again, you're being deliberate in your action, deliberate in your training. But one of the messages for our guys, especially we had a lot of first and second year guys, is that, the guys who are successful in our league are guys that are strong. They're guys that as they get to 23 and 24 and 25 years old, they've put in the work and they're consistent in their off-ice training during the season and in the off season. So building strength in the off season and then within the season, being able to maintain that for whatever way they can. So with university players, university college players, they have an opportunity at least a couple of days a week to get in some sort of lift and still be able to play their games. Whereas in pro and in major junior, it tends to be there's a lot of games, so it's a little bit tougher. But yeah, those off ice habits, what I say is that, do they align with where you want to be as a player? So if you want to be a better skater, do your off ice, off season habits align with that? Are you working on your flexibility? Are you working on your leg strength? Are you working with a skating coach? If they're not, and you show up at camp and you think you're going to be a better skater, well, it might happen, but you stack the deck in your favor if you're doing the work and putting it in and taking positive action towards things that need to get you where you need to go. And eventually, if you have the habits that will align with where you want to go with your goals and the type of player that you expect to be, you're going to get there. It might not happen in the summer. It might happen in 3 or 4 or 5 years, right? It doesn't necessarily happen that quickly for some people, but those are the things of the persistence and staying with it and continuing on the pathway towards your goals. But in the off season, the off season is, you got to mix in some overall athleticism is very important to avoid injury during the year. Talk often about, and this is, from personal experience as a player, that it's a total picture thing. It's, you got to, now there's so much support for athletes in different ways that it's not just weightlifting. It's, you got to get your plyometrics, you get your if you can run and you can bike and you can swim and you can do yoga and meditate, like those are all things that make you overall better athlete. And playing different sports, especially for young athletes, it makes you better as you get older. It makes your body better as you get older, be able to adapt to different situations. And those are things that are always important, no matter how old you get, is you want to be able to be dynamic and be able to adapt. And playing other sports is great for that. And it keeps you fresh too, in terms of wanting to get back to start the season.
Man, you just dropped so many good nuggets in there. Talking about building a foundation of fitness. I mean, there's a major competitive advantage, just consistently putting in the work to building a fitness base. You talked about developing a plan. And more importantly, within that plan, do your habits align with your goals? I think that is something important, because how many people you hear, they just work really hard, but maybe they're not hitting the marks that they need to or working at the right plan. It's like climbing a ladder, but it's all, leaning against the wrong wall. You're not going where you need to go. So I think that's awesome. And then the third thing is that something may not happen in the summer, but persistence pays. So like, for example, I remember having a player and his movement patterns were terrible, which just based on that, like he couldn't physically do the footwork needed for the skating. So like the skating was the second piece. So he first year worked on getting movement patterns, strength and conditioning, got that. And then the next year he was finally able to work on the skating. And if he didn't do it in that order and had that plan, it just would have been an absolute disaster trying to do it. So having that plan, being able to stick with it for over a year, I feel like it's very hard for a lot of athletes, but the ones that can do it, it definitely pays off. That long-term plan really does. So the next place I want to take this conversation is around what you've learned this past season. Now you've coached in professional hockey. You've been around NCAA hockey or CIS in your case here. So I'm curious what you've learned along the journey. And then more importantly, from this first year at McGill, what's that been like?
The standard is that would be the first thing that comes to mind. And the standard is what you accept. And I remember someone telling me this. I think I was reading a book on training dogs, and recently got a puppy. So I was reading this book, and they were talking about, well, the standard the dog is going to do, and I'm not comparing players to dogs, but the dog is going to do what you allow it to do, right? And if you set a standard, it will follow that standard. And you can see it really fast when you're training a puppy, because it's they're going to go wherever they want, unless you can kind of reel them in and slowly teach them and help them grow. And there's two methods too, like the method that I subscribe to, and similar to with the players, is you want to reward positive behavior. So while I was training the dog, it's, they're doing something right, you catch them doing it right away. And you hear coaches talk about it all the time, and it's true. But never really saw it apply as quickly as possible as it did with the dog, because it was like, all right, so sit. As soon as they sit, you give one. So then all of a sudden they want another treat. So as soon as they do it, they're going to do it. And it happened so fast with the dog. And I think I became a better coach just going through that process at the same time as with the team, because it's, at times during the year, probably, and there's a tendency for all coaches, you can catch guys, you can see all the mistakes the team's making, right? Like every team, we said everyone's going to make mistakes, and you want to improve from them. Then you want to create the environment where people are, they want to improve from the mistakes, but you got to model the correct behavior first. So making sure that was kind of an eye opener to say, all right, well, we lost 7 in a row in the first half of the year. And so as a coach, you're reflecting, you say, what can you do better? And you say, well, maybe this is it. Maybe it's, catch the guys doing it right. Like they're all good hockey players. They all know what to do. Let's celebrate the good behaviors. Let's celebrate the things that they're doing right. And we'll see where that goes, and see if that can then create some positive cycles where we're trying to recreate all those good things. And we had success in the second half of the year from not necessarily just that. We learned from the process as well. But that was great. So those you learn from outside of your life as well. Like, you're not just coaching hockey. And so learned a lot from the dog training book.
That's
Maybe
awesome.
A better coach.
Yeah. I mean, it's so important. How many coaches, when they watch film, they just point out all the things that were wrong and just take it to negative town. And it's like, I don't know about you, but anytime I receive bad news or feedback, like the first thing is like, how can I suddenly get better? It's like, how can I avoid this? And then you stop making plays, and then you kind of go into a shell, rather than what you said, when you start rewarding good behavior, pointing out things that are happening right. Now there's more freedom. They're making better decisions. Like the shackles are falling off, as they say. That's awesome. That's a great story. Is there any other lessons you've learned along the way? What would be some of the biggest coaching influences on you that you try to take forward? Whether that be guys you worked under or just people you've learned from, the outside or mentors in general?
The mentorship aspect is very important, and I'm really lucky in the role that I'm in now to have some great mentors just around hockey. And the one that I speak with most often is Marty Raymond, and he's a coach that he was the head coach at McGill when I played, and he went on from there to coach in as an assistant in the NHL with Tampa Bay and Ottawa. And he's a wealth of knowledge, and I turn to him for those tough moments. And aside from that, lucky to also have some other mentors that are around the McGill program as well. Peter Smith, you and I had talked about before. He was the coach of the women's team, and then as a coach from pro hockey, was really lucky to work with some outstanding coaches and learn from them. Dallas Eakins was the head coach when I started, and Sylvain Lefebvre was the assistant. Both those guys, just being in the room with them and watching them and seeing how they do things. Dallas, in terms of creating culture, he's outstanding with that, and spends a lot of time with building that. And he was really good. And Sylvain's approach, his daily approach to helping the D-men get better was, just being around those guys helped a lot. And then Kevin Denis was head coach for 2 years there in San Diego, and he was a guy that with a wide breadth of experience in gold medal, the Stanley Cup, there's a reason why those guys have success, and you look and you try to learn from them. And so you look at mentors, this idea is, having somebody that can help you in those difficult situations, so you're not on an island as a coach. I think is really important, because some coaches can get in these roles in situations where it's a tough job. It can be pretty lonely, and you need someone to talk to that's been through it and can kind of guide you through the tough times. And so those mentors, people that you can actually physically talk to, are great. And then there's other mentors from afar as well that you can look at and say, like in different sports. And I like watching other sports, like watching soccer, and look at coaches in European soccer and say, hey, like, that's cool. They're doing something different. You can be inspired from them. So, there's that mentorship that's actual, that physical, somebody that you can meet and talk to and really get down and talk about some X's and O's and leadership development and that sort of stuff. But then also to say, look from afar, to say, okay, well, these guys are having success. Let's take a closer look. How's he doing an interview? How is he answering that question? If he's answering the question like that, how are his players reacting? And those are the things that are interesting to watch. And you watch great coaches, guys are around different leagues that have won and have had success, and they have an ability to inspire their players. And often, if you listen to the message that from the players and you listen to the message from the coach, it's aligned. So that means the message in the dressing room is coming out in the public as well. And those guys tend to be able to get out in front of some of the more difficult problems that can occur out in public. And in college and university hockey, it's not necessarily as you're not under fire in the public domain as often, but it's fun to look at those situations and learn from them as well.
Yeah, that's couldn't have been said any better. I think Don Granato right now, what he's doing at Buffalo and all the messages that are coming out of that locker room is absolutely fascinating. So I will double down on that aspect of, like, you can learn from afar, but I'll also double down on the fact that it can get lonely at the top. Build up your mentor base, and you're going to need that support system, whether it be your wife or your partner, or a fellow coach or someone you've worked under in the past. So 10 out of 10. I Revac approved as well. I'm excited for the McGill program here. I feel like you're going to do good work for a long time. Is that the ultimate is continue to give back to the place that gave you so much?
Yeah. And we've building off the conversation about mentors, and Marty was a mentor to me and had built the program up over a long period of time to a point where in college hockey, you could have sustained success. You bring in the right people in, you could pass that culture on from players down and from inside the dressing room. So looking to recreate with my own footprint of some of the stuff that he and the coaches before me had built, and I was an assistant coach here at McGill with Kelly Nobes, who he's passed away, but another guy that, working alongside and seeing the way they operate, and he was able to carry on the culture here, and being able to kind of continue that. That's the goal, and to build it up to be a team that can compete for the nationals every year and have the best student athletes in the country. And we have guys that are incredibly dedicated to school and hockey, and it's fun being around those guys. It's invigorating as a coach, because 2 years after they leave, they're going to be way smarter than you, and or probably before that. So it's fun working with those guys, and then kind of seeing where they end up a few years down the road.
All right, now we have recruiting video all set to go.
Yeah. So if you know any players in the area, we're always looking.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on. I'll give you a minute, 2 minutes, whatever you need to get some shout outs, talk about whatever you want to talk about, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, thanks, Greg, for having me on. Appreciate it. No real shout outs, just, it's always looking to connect with coaches and continue to share. It's fun. Like, as a coach, love talking to others, and everyone's kind of going through the same thing, and you're learning from each other, and been lucky to be in some different coaching networks over the COVID break, and got to learn from others, and meet a lot of interesting people. And there's a lot of interesting people in this business, and it's a business or profession. It's fun, right? We're lucky to be doing what we're doing, and the players are to thank for that. But yeah, that's it. Just thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. Cheers.
Cheers.
That concludes this week's episode. Thanks for joining us here at Hockey IQ. If you haven't already, take a quick moment to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and drop a review. If you want to be a great teammate, even recommend us to a friend. You can follow us at Hockey's Arsenal on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the website, hockeysarsenal.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter. You won't regret it. Catch your buttes here next week for a brand new episode.